you, honey. Are you good too?
Yeah.
It's heavy.
From you.
Thank
Everyone, thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Alexa, and I'm on the events team here at Bookstore Magic, and we're so excited to have Saumya and Palak Patel to celebrate the launch of The Guilt Pill. Please give it up. All right. A Guilt Pill is a taut psychological drama about a CEO on maternity leave who goes missing after she becomes addicted to an experimental guilt-erasing pill. In Guilt Pill, pill is really just a hog for this mic. In Guilt Pill, Dave explores the themes of motherhood, privilege, race, and how the world treats women who dare to have it all. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few logistical issues with y'all. We do have a bathroom. It's right by the moleskin spinner. It says bathrooms are magic. Pretty fitting. We'll be doing a hand raised audience Q&A after the talk. So start thinking of some good questions now. And then after the event tonight, Saumya will be signing closer to where you guys checked in, and I'll give you a little signal for that towards the end. And if you're joining us in a YouTube live stream, please click the link in the bio so you can buy a copy of Guilt Pill in the description box below. All right, and just some bios, and we'll get into the event. Saumya Dave is a writer, board-certified psychiatrist, and mental health advocate. She's the author of 3 novels, The Guilt Pill, Well-Behaved Indian Women, and What a Happy Family. Her essays, articles, and poetry have been featured on Good Morning America, The Today Show, Meet the Press, and more. Saumya is a frequent television contributor to NBC News, where she discusses a variety of mental health topics, and she lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 children. Palak Patel is the author of The Chutney Life, her debut and best-selling cookbook that features 100 Indian-inspired recipes. She has been featured on the Food Network, The Today Show, and The New York Times. Palak is also a content creator who uses her platform to share recipes and her day-to-day life as a busy mom to 2 boys. She's passionate about supporting small businesses, empowering women in all areas of their life, and has used her platform to cultivate a community of thousands. Okay, without any further delay, please join me in giving these 2 a round of applause.
Thank you.
I'm going to take my charger out now. All right, thank you all for coming here. What an amazing turnout. So I'm going to dive right in, and I'm going to make some. Let's just start kind of from the beginning. What inspired this book?
So it was 2019. I'm not going to go year by year, I promise. But it was December 2019. I had given birth to our first child, and Samir, my very dapper husband, who's right here doing a million things, we were talking about just what our plans were, for the postpartum period and what we call after the 4th trimester, which is those first 3 months after birth. And I had this really great idea of how this cute little new companion of ours was just going to be integrated into my life. I was thinking, I'm going to go do all the things I did before, but I'm just going to have a cute friend with me, and nothing's going to change about my life. Well, I was in for a very rude awakening from the start. So that is where the initial seed started, where I wondered, why didn't anyone tell me? This is what happens to someone after they give birth. So it started there. And then, of course, I had these thoughts of how maybe when my 4th trimester is done, I will get back into the world, integrate a little bit into this new self. And that was March of 2020. So we all know what happened then for all of us around the world. And what I realized was that I was experiencing new motherhood in what felt like a pressure cooker. And a lot of wonderful friends had told me that I would feel guilty when I gave birth and became a mom. But I kind of thought as well that I would just have it figured out because I was organized or something, probably something really irrational. I thought I would have that guilt part figured out. It hit so hard. The guilt came in so hard. And especially that uncertainty that was there at the time about the virus and the state of the world and what was going to happen to people just really came at me. And I started thinking, I'm a psychiatrist during the day, and so I began thinking, what if I could take a pill that could get rid of guilt for hours at a time? What would that be like? And then that's really where Maya's story began. And then in 2021, I just sat down and wrote it. And 6 drafts later, this is where we are.
And, obviously Maya is a complex character, yet she's really relatable. Was that character kind of based on your experience? And, when you're a mom and you have experience around that, but did you find that you still had to do research, when it came to her character, when it came to motherhood? Were there other things that you wanted to explore for the book?
Yeah, definitely. I think that both of those are certainly true. You know, I took a lot of my own questions and my uncertainties and my fears about being a new mom and I poured them into her. And then she really came into her own. I was just telling Samir this the other night. I read 30 nonfiction books actually for research for this book because I really wanted to learn about how motherhood is approached from different angles. So I read some anthropology books, some psychiatric books, and they really helped me see just how we not only approach motherhood, but how the world treats mothers in different ways. And so Maya really became informed from a lot of those different pieces put together. I'm not a founder, but I've always been so fascinated by people who can build something from nothing. I think that they're incredible to be able to follow through with a vision like that. And when I was in the final months of my first pregnancy, I saw a founder come on a very popular morning show. She was pregnant at that time, and she made a really eloquent speech about being able to still pursue her dreams and still build her company. And I remember thinking, that is sticking with me. That woman, she's just there in my brain. And so it was a combination of things, which I think is one of the fun things about fiction writers. We have some really great fiction writers here, by the way. And so I'm not going to call anyone out just yet, but just wait. But it's one of the fun things is that you can actually have things percolate in your mind for a while and you don't really know how they're going to come together. And it feels really fun to play with those different elements.
And, a cookbook is kind of very clear cut and different when you're writing it. Like you decide on recipes and then you kind of just figure those out, maybe small tweaks. But what was it like kind of from beginning to end? Did you have this clear cut vision? You had this idea about this guilt kind of erasing pill. You knew the character. Were there different versions of the storyline? How many like drafts did you go through? And what was the writing process? Did it evolve as you evolved, right? Because you had your first and then you had your second and then things change, right? So were there many versions and how did you kind of evolve in writing?
Absolutely. I mean, I wrote 6 full drafts from start to finish where so many things changed. And then when we're thinking about what we call partials, just sections of the book, I mean, anywhere from 15 to 20, quite honestly. And what I learned, it was my first time writing anything in the speculative space, in that what if this were possible space. And that was something I really had to learn how to do. And so I learned through the rewrites that the pill actually was a character and needed to be treated like a character that really instigated change and created turmoil in the environment around it and had to do with what happens to this main character. In the beginning drafts, the pill was this fun sideline kind of thing that could just be taken and then, the character moves on. And I realized it had to be more impactful for that. I think I turn to stories because I want to feel like there's something on the line, like there's stakes there and I'm invested because of those things. And I was missing that in the early drafts. I am curious for a cookbook, just how the process works. I know so many people here probably don't even know how to write a cookbook. I certainly don't. But is it different? Do you go through drafts and do you go through versions as well? Or do you have your set recipes from the beginning?
So, initially the editor wants to kind of see, my book was very clearly labeled 100 Indian inspired recipes. So I was like, all right, I guess we're leaning into 100 here. Obviously, they count like the little chutneys and stuff counts as recipes. But it wasn't. I think what you have to do is way harder. I feel like this was, a version of like a chicken and rice bowl might change an ingredient and you go through versions and you do have to test. I will say it's not fun doing that again and again and again in the kitchen. Sometimes you're like, you know what? Maybe this recipe is not meant to be. Like, we're going to just cut it. So in that sense, it's kind of more clear cut. Like, this is either going to work, it's going to be good. And I had a lot of taste testers, and my husband was kind of like the ultimate one. If I really was doubtful that this was going in the book or not.
What a lucky guy.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
He was kind of the ultimate, like, naysayer. So it was like, do you like it? And he'd say, yeah, it's good. I'm like, would you eat it again? That was like the magic question. If he said he would eat it again, we'll put it in the book. And he's like, yeah, I don't think I'd eat this again. I'm like, all right, then it's not going in the book. Like, we just can't, so.
Oh, I love it. So he went through all those recipes with you.
Yeah, he had to. Yeah.
Wow.
Even the ones that some he understood, like, maybe this just isn't for me. Like, it's not my flavor profile, but maybe you should ask some of your friends. Like, don't just. And so I knew which ones to get his advice on and which ones to ask certain friends for. Like, there was like a whole, kind of routine of people picking up things from my outdoor little Baskin Robbins fridge that I have in my garage. I'm like, there's leftovers, there's things for you to try, text me notes, right? So
he must have had very happy family and friends during
I
this
do.
time.
They were very happy and they were very sad when I stopped testing. I'm like, we are done. And she's like, any soup that you want to try again? Maybe things need a little bit more editing. I'm like, no, I think we're good. And like my husband literally complains, he's like, you go around, you're talking about your book all the time. Can't remember the last time I ate anything from it. I'm like, it's the you can open it up and the recipe is there for you, sir. So it's really great when he says he's hungry. I'm like, yes, page 25. Go ahead. I will enjoy that for dinner as well. So it's wonderful.
Well, as someone who cannot cook, this is the cookbook that we turn to for all of our recipes. So thank you for making it.
I love that. I know you make a lot of stuff and I always see it tagged.
Thank you. You're the reason my family eats. So.
And the character in this book, so Maya is in the tech world in this book. Was there a specific reason that that's the role and that's like her profession that you chose that for her?
Yeah, so my husband works in tech, and so I feel like I hear about it peripherally. Of course, I don't know the nuances and the ins and outs, but it's an industry I've always been really fascinated by. And when it comes to specifically founders, again, just the way they can build something that wasn't there and then put it out there for others, I just am blown away by that. When I saw that founder on the popular morning show, I began doing what I always do, which is just reading, research. And I found these incredible interviews with different women who had founded companies. And I started seeing these trends. And one very interesting one was that a lot of women who founded companies felt the stress to represent their companies in a values-based way in their social media profiles. And that was something men did not feel. And I began thinking, what else are they grappling with? I'm sure there are many things beyond my own comprehension, but as I began kind of diving into more of what specifically a woman who founds a brand has to grapple with, I just knew that I had to create Maya and have her do this job because there's so many forces coming at her all the time. She's made to feel like everything's her responsibility, but then also everything's her fault. Her coworker gets credit for a lot of her ideas. A lot of times when they're in a room with investors, people direct questions to him, even though she's the one who knows the answers. She gets judged on past performance. The men around her get judged on future potential. And so there were all of these interesting dynamics that I read that happen in a lot of workplaces, by the way, not of course just the tech world, but I thought would be really fun to play with, especially when she's going through this huge life transition herself.
And Maya's not just a founder, she's also an influencer with 1 million followers, her character. And you also, you're an author, you are a psychiatrist, you're doing media coverage all the time, and you're on social media. What has it been for you? What's it been like to kind of incorporate all of those things that you do and you're on social media, right? And I feel like there's kind of that, similarity between Maya and what you're doing where there's all these things and on top of it, you almost have to do social media so you can do all the other things. So I'd love to know kind of how that's been for you.
Well, I think the last part of what you said is really how I feel. I've actually been quite lucky. I have to do it. And so it almost feels as though social media is maybe an adjacent or an add-on to some of the work I do. It's definitely not, I would not call myself by any means an influencer and for that to be my job at all. I don't think that I actually do what it takes to have that be my job. And so in that way, I've had this separation. I can just have it be a space that provides me a lot of fun and a lot of inspiration, a lot of connection. That's how we met. And I met so many wonderful people that way. And it was interesting to go into the head of someone who has to post all the time, who has to move products, who has to portray a certain image and that pressure that comes with it. And then also people thinking they know her because she is always sharing pieces of herself and her life and her family. And so this parasocial relationship develops where I feel like people probably think they know you too, right? Yeah. And so what is that? What happens when there's really this mismatch between what we feel like we see from someone we think we know and then what's actually happening? And that was a fun space to learn about and really play with. Did you always want to be on social media? I mean, I feel like you're such a natural on there. And so I'm so curious about your relationship with it and how things evolved for you.
So, and I always thought, when I'm married and I'm finally kind of settled, I'm going to start a blog. And this was back when there wasn't Instagram really, and there was these blogs where people would write those daily posts about their life.
So fun.
It was like an online diary. And I think like the Pioneer Woman was like the first person that I followed, and she would just write, and I would be on it every day. And I'm like, this is like better than TV, especially I love to read as a child. So I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to talk about whatever it is. And then initially the idea was to just share the kinds of recipes I grew up eating. A lot of our friends and family after we got married, they started cooking a lot more. And I had, I come from a big family. Food was always kind of the center of everything we did. And I naturally I knew how to cook since I was young. And a lot of my friends didn't, so they'd see me make this or that, and then I'd be texting them recipes, and then they would ask me like the funniest questions, like, when you mean chopped cilantro, can you send a picture? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are serious. Like, they wanted pictures, so now I'm sending like step by step pictures and group texts and all these things. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is just how I start the blog, like, because it's getting really annoying to text people pictures and email them images and attachments and stuff. So I was like, let's just find a place on the internet where I can throw these recipes up. And honestly, I wanted to really write more, but the recipes took up so much of my time. And then you have to learn how to photograph recipes. And then Instagram just blew up, right? It was Instagram, and then there was stories. And now the more I posted about food, people wanted to know about other stuff in my life. So it kind of just naturally, I always kind of, food is the center. And then I leaned into the things that people asked me for. So if they asked for things, you know, when I became a mom, there was a lot of questions around motherhood. And I feel like I haven't grappled with social media in a negative way so far, just because I've always tried really hard to just, you know, it's not aesthetic and it's not aspirational. It should be like inspirational. You know, like, I don't want you to aspire for my lifestyle or my anything that I do. You know, I don't even care if you don't like to cook. Like, don't cook, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, if anytime I post, I'm like, is this valuable for anybody? And I think that really helps. I think when you know, kind of like the character in this book, when you reach a certain number of followers, or when it is your full-time job, you almost have no choice and you have to post these things. And I try really hard not to do that. I try to make sure that it is real life. And people do. I see people all the time like, oh my gosh, how are the kids and this and that? And I was like, wait, do I know you in real life? Have we met? Or like, this is like, you know, someone who follows me and they're like, I feel like I know you. I'm like, well, you do. Because I do share genuinely, like, you know, and I have so many friends and family. I would get called out so fast if I wasn't like the same person everywhere. So I think that's really important, is kind of like really having your why. You know, is, you know, for me, is it valuable? Is it funny? Is it relatable? Is it going to make someone feel better? And if I think it's going to make someone feel crappy, or, you know, have this comparison thing, then I'm like, you know, the internet doesn't need to see everything. Instagram doesn't need to see everything I did in my day. So I've actually kind of like taken a step back, and I try to really focus on the things that I think will be valuable or entertaining. Sometimes just pictures of my kid, you know, that's it.
which we love. So it's evolved. It's evolved
Yeah, it's
over
evolved,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
I lost my notes here. All right, so you have two other books, Well-Behaved Indian Women and What a Happy Family. What a Happy Family. How would you say that this book is different from those two, and how are they the same? And do you purposely try to make some things similar? Like, are there things in your storyline, you know, as a writer, where you have these things that you think you'll always include in all of your books and all of your characters? Or do you kind of sit down and say, I'm going to make this book different from these other books in this specific way?
Yeah, you know, it's so funny. When I was writing The Guilt Pill and first talking about it with people, I said, I've switched genres, I'm doing something completely different. And it was actually conversations with Samir that helped me realize, yeah, the genre might technically be different, but the heart is actually the same. I think I always try to write about people struggling, doing their best, maybe hitting rock bottom, but ultimately finding their way. And also people really grappling with what their identity is and who they want to be in life. So that's the truth across all of my books. The topics for sure change. And I will say that I think becoming a mom actually helped me feel really comfortable with taking a big creative risk and playing with what if for this book. The first two, I would call them more family centered stories. They'll always be close to my heart. But this one, it felt like I was able to experiment and play and really go maybe beyond where I was able to go in the first two. So definitely, I think it still has the heart of it. I've heard from some really wonderful readers already who have said, oh, this reminds me of this character from Well-Behaved Indian Women, or this dynamic in What a Happy Family. So that means a lot. And then I have heard from a couple who have said, this is totally a departure and I like it. So I'm here for all of it. I'm sure different people will also walk away with different interpretations, but it's fun. I feel really lucky to be able to do this.
You know, in the book, you know, Maya has a lot of roles, right? A lot of shoes that she fills. Not only is she a founder, but she's a new mom. You know, she's very heavily involved with her parents. There's just so many, and like you, multi-hyphenate. You're a psychiatrist. You are an author. You're doing a lot of media coverage. How do you kind of navigate all of those roles, right? Like, how do you balance all of those and finding time for each of those things?
I think, well, how much time do we have? Like, I could talk about that forever with you and with everyone here. So, I think for a while I used to think I have to be everything to everyone all the time, very similarly to how Maya does. And what I've learned now over the last few years, especially, is that life is both and. And if anybody hears me say both and multiple times, feel free to just tune me out and not talk to me for the rest. I won't be offended. But I used to think, okay, once I finish, for example, once the kids go to bed, I'll be relaxed then. I'll have my time then. Once they're potty trained, I'm going to be able to do this. And I'm realizing that actually the chaos and the uncertainty and the back and forths, that's actually just a part of it. And it's really helped me be more present and actually lower the stakes and the expectations and the pressures on myself. So yes, have I been on a news segment before where outside the door my older son is saying, "Mommy, where are you? I want to see you." And I can hear him, but thankfully nobody else can on TV. And I have my mic in and I just keep smiling. Yes, that happens, and it's happened multiple times. And then also, am I sometimes thinking about my book when I'm with my kids? Totally. Do I get to practice psychiatry during the week and really just feel so grateful to be able to do that? Yes. And then sometimes does that mean that right when I'm done with my last visit, it's time to go into book world? Absolutely. So I'm trying to embrace all of it in a more integrative way instead of thinking, oh, once this is done, I get to do this or I get to be this person. It all actually is me, and different seasons might require different versions of me to come forward, but maybe that's also part of the point too.
Yeah, I think the entire, women who do multiple things, I think we often always get asked, how do you balance everything, right? And you'll hear everyone say very similar things, like there's really no true balance. At different times, different things take priority. And being okay with the chaos, I think that is like the only thing that you can lean into. And I have a lot of friends who have like older kids, and I'm like, oh my God, how does it feel? Like you're in the golden years. And they're like,
Are you
no,
free?
no. And I'm like, wait, don't tell me. They're like, no, it doesn't get easier. I'm like, wait, I thought like there was like once my, older one's 6, once he's 10, once he's 15. They're like, no, small kids, small problems, big kids, big problems. I'm like, oh, I
I've
see
heard
where
the
it's going.
same.
But I think just knowing that that's going to be okay, and that when you get there, you'll cross that hill type of thing. But just embracing the chaos helps a lot. That I'm not crazy. Like it's all crazy for everyone, all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. We're all doing the best we can. And I do have to give a shout out to my husband. He makes my life easier. I saw this quote from, I think it was Viola Davis, and she wrote that, and it really resonated with me because I think the people who we're around and who we spend our time with, and they make such a big difference, I think, in the quality of our lives. And so I just really hit the jackpot in that realm, and I feel so lucky. So I couldn't do any of this without the most amazing people in the world. So
yes. Round of applause for the husband. Yes. It takes a village. So, and he's part of the village. I think we went through all of our questions here.
Ooh, should we open up to audience questions early? We can do that.
Yes.
Does anybody have a question? Oh, hello.
Anything they want to talk about.
Yeah, I know. Definitely this one. It was the most emotional one to write by far. It, helped me go to this new place creatively. It felt fun. It was challenging. And I also felt like I got to explore something that I think is still not discussed enough, which is the postpartum period, maternal mental health, how we treat parents and caregivers, these themes that I could honestly talk about forever. And so it just felt very special to be in the world of this book. I honestly could still stay in it for as long as is required, because I think it's just so important, even from a thematic perspective. And I enjoy books that actually cover all of these topics, whether they're fiction or nonfiction. So this one definitely has the most special place in my heart.
And I should have asked this, but what has your actual experience with guilt been? So obviously, this is like the theme of the book. But how did you navigate the guilt? Right? I'm sure you had a little bit. I think we all kind of have phases where we go through it. But how did you cope, and how did you navigate?
Yeah, so actually this was one of those meta situations where researching guilt for this book helped me with guilt in my own life. And so I found that depending on the mental health expert or the researcher whom I came across, they divided guilt differently, but one division I really liked was maladaptive guilt and adaptive guilt. Maladaptive being guilt being guilt that's not really helping us. It's more like an emotional muscle memory that's present and it's there, can be very strong and can guide many of our decisions, but it's not really serving us. And then adaptive guilt being guilt that cues us into our own values. And I think sitting with ourselves, journaling, reflection, speaking to people who know us and whom we trust, they can kind of help us tease apart the differences between the two. And again, those might change with seasons, but that actually really helped. Funny story, which happened 3 times. When I was pregnant the first time, 3 different friends told me that they had this fantasy of being mildly injured so that they could be hospitalized, so that food could be brought to them and they could watch a TV show.
There's like Instagram reels about those where like, you know,
Right?
the woman's like slightly about to fall off, like fall down a flight of stairs. Like,
Yes.
should I do it? Should I do it?
Yes.
Like there's a lot,
It's
too
really,
many.
thank you. It's a thing. And now I think more and more people are sharing this, what's called a hospital fantasy. And I asked 3 of these friends, you know, I said, why wouldn't you just do it? Like, you know, can you ask somebody to help you out so you can go take a night for yourself or do this? And they all said it's the guilt. And so I thought, wow, this force is so strong that it's making people fantasize about being hospitalized so they can watch Law and Order SVU. Wow.
In the hospital.
In the
like
hospital.
not the comfort of their home.
Right?
And I literally just yesterday to my cousin said, because she's like, oh, I think I'm getting sick. I'm going to lay down. I was like, oh, how come I never get sick? And she was like, are you crazy? I'm like, how come I never have a cold? I just want to lay in bed. And, you know, not even the guilt. I don't think I have that, but just for the break sometimes.
The break, because
yeah.
you're always on. You're always
Because
on.
you don't, you know, and it does go back to guilt, because why don't you actively just take the break with intention? Because you feel like you should be doing X, Y, Z, you know, not even if you're not a mom, you just feel guilty for taking a break because you should be working, you should be calling your friends, you should be doing X, Y, Z, a million things. So I think that in general, you know, motherhood or not, it's so hard.
Yeah.
So.
Wait, so you don't feel that much guilt? I love it. We should all be turning to you for all the
No,
wisdom.
I mean, I think with my first, I don't think I felt guilt. And I'm kind of like you, not that I've done all the research, but I kind of have to reflect and think very logically. And that really helps me. You know, when I do start to feel guilty, I'm like, listen, I kind of look at the positive side. And, you know, when we're traveling and you have to leave your kids, many people do with like your parents or your in-laws. I'm like, wow, how lucky they are that they get to spend this one-on-one
wow, we have an
time.
entire profession
Yeah.
to get there. So that's great.
But I mean, I have to, or I will spiral. Like
Yeah.
I know myself, and if I let myself go down that one road, then I'm just gonna have a crappy time, you know, and that's not good for me. That's not really good for anybody. It defeats the purpose of, you know, going anywhere, doing anything else. So I kind of look at every positive, like how lucky my parents are that they get to spend this one-on-one time. Because if I'm there, my kids will just cling to me. So I think of that, you know, they're getting this, you know, undivided attention, and they get spoiled when we're gone most of the time from parents and family members. So I kind of look at the upside, and I think mentally, like, you can't let yourself go into that negative, like, self-talk, because then it just spirals. One idea becomes either, why did I leave? I'm not a good mom. That's why I left. Like, so-and-so doesn't leave her kids at home, and maybe I should be more like her. Like, you know, you can't let that go too far.
Yeah.
So I just kind of stop it and say, no, I'm doing great.
One of the exercises I sometimes prescribe, so to speak, is a self-talk log, where you actually write down the ways you're talking to yourself when you notice, and you write it down for about 2 weeks. And then at the end of that period, you look at what it says and see, what are the words you're using towards yourself, and are they harsh? Would you speak that way to a friend? You know, and I've heard people sometimes say things, even friends of mine, that they say to themselves, and I've just said, ouch, wow, that's not very nice. And so that's really incredible that you have that, because I think self-talk is such a big part of that.
And I listened to a podcast this morning, and it said, you know, I forget who it was, but they said that we're actually, don't quote me on this, but that we're actually chemically wired to have more negative self-talk.
Yes.
Like it just sticks more.
Yes. Our brain,
should know,
our
yes.
brain is drawn to stress because it helps
Yeah.
us evolutionary wise.
And
it
I'm
helps
like,
us.
oh my gosh. And, you know, so you have to work that much harder to do the upside. So you have to really put in effort to have positive self-talk. And so those affirmations that people are sticking on their mirrors, all of that really works. And it sounds so silly. And I think Mel Robbins' this thing where you like touch the mirror and you actually say it out loud. And I'm like, all right, man, I'm feeling crazy, but I'm going to actually do it. And you realize how important it is, you know, when you're having a rough day, to constantly have the positive self-talk, you know, and around guilt, around all the things in your life. So
yeah, I think when we're having a tough day, we also get into those loops, right?
Yeah.
That might feel familiar to us from, you know, other times, but totally to get out of those is everything.
Yeah.
For sure. We just went off. I just said audience questions, and then we just started talking about everything under the sun. So
anybody else want to
feel
talk?
free to jump in. I think I saw Sheeple first.
Yeah.
So how much of the world influences your writing in general? And then before this book came out, did you make any changes with what was going on maybe in the world or in the cultural kind of ethos? Just curious.
Yeah, definitely. I think the world is constantly informing my work all the time. I mean, I'll read something, I'll read an essay, I'll read a piece of a nonfiction book, I'll read a novel, and something will sit, maybe not even in that moment, but I'll realize a little bit later that, oh, that there's something there. There's a kernel of something that I'm not letting go of. And so that means something. And in terms of changes, you know, we were very blessed to be able to have family support when our first kid was born. And then we have childcare now. And so being able to know that it does take multiple people. We're not meant to go through parenting and caregiving alone, I think has been really, really valuable for me. And if that's something I can help provide in other people, that comfort in doing so and advocating for themselves and supporting themselves, then I'm always here for that. But I think that was a hard thing. I think for a while, I thought I had to do everything on my own and it was all on my shoulders. And if things weren't going well, then it was also all my fault. So it was a full spectrum of taking maybe too much accountability. And that's definitely changed over the years. And it's made things a lot better on all fronts. I think I saw
There's a few
other
other-
hands.
yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to like your research with guilt and motherhood, there's a lot of similarities across different cultures. But being a South Asian woman, was there anything that kind of stuck to you, that would help amongst the South Asian diaspora that kind of, stuck with you a little bit more? But then you also perhaps saw similarities for other women, because
Yeah.
motherhood is, universal. Guilt is also universal. But was there anything from the South Asian lens and South Asian lens that stuck?
Yeah, definitely. I think that first of all, the being a children of immigrants, right? I'm a child of immigrants and an immigrant, and Maya is a child of immigrants. She's an eldest daughter, and so one thing I did learn was that when many people become parents, they start to actually face their own childhoods. They're taken back in time, actually a little bit, and for her, that had to do with all of the struggles her parents faced and her wanting to make something out of those, a sense of purpose, and that's something I've heard a lot from South Asians, but also across cultures when they feel like there's been a lot of sacrifice that they almost have to do something to show for it, so to speak. And so that definitely played a big role. And then also feeling that responsibility of integrating your parents and your family into a new world, into a new culture. That's something that she carries quite heavily on her shoulders. And I'd read some books where women from different parts of the world talked about just what they feel towards their parents in particular when they enter this new life stage. So that was very fascinating and fun to see.
Can you talk a little bit about how you got into writing, from your first book to like where that idea sparked, knowing that you have a separate day job at that time, and now just a little bit about the history would be great.
Oh, sure. So I've always been a reader. Did anybody read Babysitter's Club growing up, or was it just me? And the Sweet Valley Twins? Thank you. Thank you for the hands. That makes me feel much better. So, we moved to the United States when I was 2, and I just was an avid reader because my parents, they worked around the clock. Books kept me company. And I just didn't know any authors growing up. And so I would see their names on books that I would get from the library. But to me, they were rock stars. I mean, it was so funny. I was telling somebody the other day that I think until even before I was published, I would go to a book signing and I would just be too scared to talk to the author because it felt like seeing a movie star or something. I was like, oh my God, they're looking at me. I can't. And so then when I was in high school and college, I just began craving stories that had to do with themes that my friends and I were talking about. And at that time, it was maybe disagreements with our parents or questions about what we wanted to be in life, who we wanted to be with, what friendship meant, all of these different things. And in looking for those books and not being able to find a lot, I thought, well, maybe I can actually pursue this dream I've had since I was very young and try to do it. And of course, I thought, oh, I have a dream. It's great. I'm going to write this book and it's going to be available to people in a year. Yeah, no. That started in 2008, and then I didn't get a publishing deal till 2018. So it was a very long, needed process of getting rejected many times, but also studying the industry and studying how to write a book. I thought because I was a reader, I could be a writer. And I think there's so much overlap, so I don't mean to minimize that. But I also think there's something to the craft of writing. So I studied books. I studied books I enjoyed. I studied books I didn't like. And I really dissected them and would take notes in the margins about what I did and did not like, what made me turn the page that time. And so that helped. And then I researched the process of how to get an agent and how to get a book deal. And that's its entire whole ball game. So it's been really a journey of learning and also a lot of unlearning. I hadn't really failed so repetitively until I got rejected, time and time again through writing. And so I think it taught me a very necessary lesson about how to view failure with curiosity instead of shame. And that was something I probably should have learned long before that, but it taught me how to fail. And I'm forever grateful for that.
I'm curious about if you've had any conversations or cool insights from men about this book, whether they're authors or not. I just love to hear, if you've seen insight from that sector.
Yeah, so I actually heard from a dad this morning who said, I do a lot. It was not this dapper young man here. And I wrote back and I said, of course you do. We love the dads of today. They're doing so much. And he was probably like, why did I even message this woman? But no, I think there's this interesting shift happening in parenting where caregiving is seen as everyone's responsibility, not just the birthing parents. And so I'm curious actually what dads do take away. One of my favorite books that I read in the research process of this is called To Have and to Hold by Molly Millwood. She's a psychologist and she works primarily with people in the family planning stages. And she has an entire chapter in that book about how a marriage changes when a child comes into the picture. And I was thinking, wow, I wish this was actually given out at OB appointments or pediatric appointments, And so, yeah, I haven't heard from too many men yet, but maybe we can change that tonight. Can we share this with men? I would love that. I would love that. Thank you.
Sarah.
Would you ever write a nonfiction book based on all your research and the work you've done?
Thank you, Bestie, for that question. Yes, I have a nonfiction book idea. It's an idea, so I'm working on it right now. And yes, I would try. I will say I will try. That's the best I can do right now. But I've always thought about it just because I love reading nonfiction. I can go just so in depth with researching almost anything that just grabs me. And so I am working on one right now, but maybe I'll flesh it out a little bit just before sharing more than that.
I think there's another question.
I was curious, what was the most fun part of writing this book, and also can you say anything about your next fictional project?
So Liz in this book, who is the founder, Maya admires, she is this big wig in the tech space, and she's the one who introduces Maya to this pill that gets rid of guilt. She started out very differently, and it's funny because when Samir read the first drafts, he said, I think she's too warm and fuzzy. I think she is. And I was like, no, she's going to stay warm and fuzzy. That's who Liz is. And then it was actually Claire, my amazing agent, who helped me go through this book and said, I think we need to make some changes here to Liz and some of the things that happened towards the end of the book, which no spoilers, of course. And it really helped me view this character from an all-encompassing lens instead of just actually the place of bias that I was in, where I didn't want to look at her as a whole human being. I wanted to just look at her as this good, fuzzy, warm, always complimentary person. But she has more to her than that. And so that was really, really fun to get into that perspective. And even I have chapters that are not in the final manuscript of her childhood and things that she's gone through and arguments she's had with her husband and with followers on the internet. I mean, there's an entire Liz book, actually. If anyone in their spare time wants to read that, happy to send it over. But yeah, I would say that was the most fun part, is really sitting with the character, thinking I knew them, and then seeing that actually they had much more to offer to me and to readers, and being able to just get to know her. I feel like, did we see another hand? I don't.
Yeah.
So even though this is a fiction book, I think it can act as like a nonfiction self-help book in a way, because I imagine, I've read it, but I imagine that it can help people process their feelings, like think about their feelings, analyze it, really, change their relationship with guilt. So even though it's fiction, it really helps people on a deep level. So I want to ask you, like, are there any one or two fiction books that you've read that you think really helped you or can help others process some deep emotions like this?
High buds. So my other bestie. So we just talked about this the other day, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, right? I think is just such an introspective book. He builds this new universe for us that I think I personally, it helped me a lot, even though it was fiction and it helped me in a nonfiction way. There's a book called Mad Woman by Chelsea Beaker. I think it's actually in the store. I just saw it when I was at the store for Jules's event a couple weeks ago. Again, fantastic book. And it's about a woman, speaking to her mother in these letters, and just so moving. And it really made me sit with my own motherhood journey and with how I communicate with my mother and all of those things. So I would say actually with every piece of fiction I read, I do take away things that sit with me in my real life. I don't know if other people feel that way. I guess it depends on the genre. Maybe with the romantasy, it's a little different. Well, we could talk after.
Yeah.
But with the books I gravitate to, they are the ones that make me think, that make me pause, and that make me learn about myself and about the people I love. And so those are just the ones I tend to be drawn to.
Yeah,
Do you feel like,
I think in fiction books, like I find myself highlighting, there will be one or two things that really resonate. Like I always have this highlighter, and it's like, are you research? What do you do? I'm like, I know, I'm just reading, but like that was just sometimes it's just the way something is written and said, and you have that aha moment, when
Yeah.
you're listening to it, whether it's a podcast, you're like, wow, I don't know, I probably heard that said in a million different ways, but that specific way that it was said really got to me, and,
Yeah.
and you want to carry that with you. Sometimes you read a beautiful book and you're like, wow, these words, like they make you feel something, and they
Yes.
help you with your emotions and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a way that fiction already
Yeah.
kind of does that in a nonfiction way.
Do you read with a highlighter?
I
love
do.
that.
I mean,
love that.
I think there's just sometimes I love reading in a, I don't know how to explain it, but like when something is written in a just really eloquent, beautiful way, and then you feel like you haven't read that elsewhere, and then I'll highlight it. And sometimes, because I have all these books and I don't like to get rid of them, so they sit there, and sometimes instead of rereading a book, then when I open it back up, I just get to read the highlighted parts, and
Ooh,
I'm
I love
slipping,
that.
when
Yeah.
I'm kind of going through it, I don't want to reread the same book again, but I'll go back and like, oh, I remember that part. I remember why I highlighted, or you wonder, why did I highlight that then, right? Because it was something you read a couple years ago and you were going through something, like, I wonder why that resonated. Sometimes I can't remember, but I think it's fun,
Yeah.
and you get to keep the little pieces of the book with you that way.
Oh, I love that. And that is so true, because you can always revisit just the parts that
Yeah.
you right,
Yeah.
wanted to. I'm not saying this to promote anyone's book buying habit. Just kidding, I am. I read something that said that actually having physical books around you helps you be happier in spaces. And so if anybody needs to justify their pile of books, I know we're in New York, so space might be limited, but they're serving a very real good purpose. And if you also get a book for someone, you are bringing happiness into their lives. And I also just learned last year that there are designers or interior decorators who only curate books for people. Like
Oh.
that's the sub specialty they're in, which I thought was so interesting. So if anybody's looking for another gig.
Go ahead, in the back. Hey.
I was curious if there was anything, character or chapter that you ended up cutting from the book that you're still thinking about, or that you're like, thank goodness that's in there.
They're definitely both. And I've cut a lot. I mean, like I said, there were 6 full drafts, and I wrote a lot of backstory for Maya and her childhood and different things that she goes through, which I've thought about whether or not to compile them in their own separate space, just to have, just because they feel really special and important. And then a lot about Liz's backstory as well. In earlier versions of this book, I had an entire group of women who are all taking the pill, and they're all friends with each other, and they're all kind of pumping each other up, maybe in a toxic way. They're like, take your pill today. How are you? And they're not in the final, they're no longer with us. I'll leave it at that. And so I think they did have to go. And, sometimes I think I've realized that I'll write a character to just actually push the plot forward, but not because they're a character. And that difference doesn't become clear until future drafts are happening. And so, yeah, there are definitely pieces that I'm glad are gone. And then there are pieces that, yeah, sure, if I could write 1,000-page books, sure. Why not? Why not?
You talked about how long it took you to go from the idea to agent and a book deal, and then the 6 round draft. So how do you write and stick with it and stay motivated from rejection?
What I think happened for me with rejections is that the first batch, they really stung. And then after that stinging sensation was gone, they became information. And so I would take them in and I would say, oh, what is this actually trying to tell me? Because a lot of times these kind agents who rejected me, they would give me a line or two about why. They said I didn't feel compelled to read further, or whatever it may have been. And then I would think, oh, what was it about the sample that I submitted? And then if I would hear sometimes the same feedback multiple times, I would think maybe there's something here. If I'm cross-triangulating notes, is there something to take away from that? And then I would share it with trusted readers. I also worked with some freelance editors who are excellent at their job, and they helped me also do further work on the manuscript. So when I started seeing the failure as information, I would think, okay, what's this trying to tell me? Instead of, this is not a statement about my worth or my potential. I need to just go back at this and do something with it and make it something that has a home, because publishing also is an industry. And so there has to be a home for the book. And I think some of my earlier ideas, they were probably okay ideas, but that's where it likely ended. They didn't have titles that they could stand next to. They didn't have a genre they could fit in. And so I knew I wanted to be in that world. And so that required also learning about the market. So a little bit of everything.
Okay. I think that's time, right? All right. I think we're all done with questions. I think do you have to wrap something up? Okay.
There was one picture I just wanted to take with everyone,
Yeah,
if that's okay.
let's-
But we can
yeah,
do it.
let's
We
do
can
that.
wait, like
Oh,
whatever,
okay.
whatever you.
I'll just give you the quick rundown
Yeah.
of how this is going to go. Thank you guys so much. Please,
Yeah.
another round of applause for these amazing people. After we take an adorable picture all together, Saumya is going to be standing in the back to sign. And if you guys take a look, my coworkers, Amali and Tiff, that is the alcove where she will be signing. And just make sure to take your belongings with you because when you stand up, we have to make it look like a bookstore again and move all these tables. It gets kind of crazy. And then if you're still with us in the YouTube live stream, please buy a copy of the book in the link below. We also have What a Happy Family at the front, and we also have The Chutney Life. So a round of applause, and thank you guys so much for coming. I'll cut the live.
Okay, perfect. Also, word of mouth helps so much with books. So if there's anyone you think who could enjoy a story about going through a big life transition, anybody who's experienced guilt, who hasn't, but really anyone who could enjoy this, I would so appreciate just spreading the word. Thank you, everyone. I wanted to take